They are not going to knock on your door with a white flag or a warning. They do not announce betrayal with drums or alerts. They come with the right smile, the right amount of praise, an outstretched hand, and an intention hidden beneath 7 layers of interest. And if you appear even the slightest sign of hesitation, if your body language is a comma out of place, they move forward. The battle for control begins not with actions, but with perception. In real-life theater, the audience judges you even before your first line. They don't have to break you on the inside, just look broken on the outside. A stray glance, a poorly placed apology, an emotional display in a public moment can all be read as weakness. And weakness in this game is not forgiven. It is used. Niccolò Machiavelli, when writing The Prince in the 16th century, he spoke not only to the political leaders of his time, but to anyone who wanted to survive among wolves. He observed that kings fell not by losing battles, but by allowing their pain to be seen. It was like this with Charles VIII, King of France, who, by underestimating the Italians and acting hastily, saw his image of strength crumble, and with it, his plans. The lesson: the internal pain doesn't matter if your face denies it with conviction. True power starts with the right mask. But see, this is not a call for cheap hypocrisy. It's a warning for self-defense. You may be in shambles inside, financial problems, family betrayals, deep insecurities. But if these signs are read by the wrong people, they won't reach out. They will use this as leverage. You've seen this. A colleague at work who reaches out sympathetically when you're vulnerable, only to use your words against you weeks later in a meeting. The smiling neighbor who comforts you, and then spreads your pain like street corner gossip. These examples are not in the history books, but they happen every day. And that's why the first rule of becoming untouchable is clear. Never bleed before the vultures. The appearance of strength must be more solid than the strength itself. And this isn't pretense. It's survival. It's like armoring your body with armor that doesn't allow emotional readings. Because the world, unfortunately, doesn't reward raw authenticity. It responds to the narrative you build. It was like this with Caterina Sforza, a woman who survived sieges and betrayals in the turbulent landscape of the Italian Renaissance, not because she was physically invincible, but because she never allowed her enemies to know how much she feared. When they tried to break her by kidnapping her children, she defied the attackers publicly, displaying absolute coldness. The image of invulnerability kept her alive. She understood the game. Now it's your turn. You don't have to be really well. It needs to look like it. Because looking good is enough to stop 90% of attacks. That's why that colleague who speaks little and smiles less commands respect. Because no one knows for sure what he thinks, what he feels, or what he plans. It has become an opaque mirror. You try to look inside, but you only see your own reflection. And that reflection can be threatening enough to deter onlookers. If he is suffering, nobody knows. If you have plans, perhaps. But doubt is your most powerful ally. Start with small habits. Don't lament your life on social media. Don't vent to those who haven't proven loyalty. Don't tell plans to anyone who isn't committed to your success. Machiavelli never told you to be cold, but to be calculated. There is a difference. An everyday example. A boss who shouts in the office loses authority. The leader who silences, observes, and responds with strategic calm is frightening, because you don't know what he's going to do. Unpredictability is a weapon. Silence, in fact, is your best shield. When you talk less, you deliver less ammunition. Every time you reveal your opinions, emotions, or plans to someone who hasn't proven they deserve it, you give away a piece of your strategy. And the more you deliver, the easier it is to be disarmed. An example? The story of Fouché, the man who survived the French Revolution, Napoleon's empire, and still prospered in the Restoration. He had no armies, but he had a cool mind and the ability to know what to keep quiet about. What made him powerful was not brute force, but the perfect reading of the moment to speak and the moment to disappear. So start from within. Kill, little by little, the need to be understood. You don't need the world to understand your pain. You need the world to respect your presence. When you exchange, "I need to be heard," for "I need to be respected," everything changes. Conversations change. Reactions change. Your image changes. And with it, the game changes. Those who once laughed at your doubts now hesitate before your direct gaze. Those who underestimated you now avoid confrontation, Because you learn to shield yourself on the outside while fixing what breaks on the inside, away from hungry eyes. And here's a secret that few accept. You don't need to be loved. It needs to be understood as a presence that demands respect. This cannot be built with nice words. It is built with posture. It's the posture that intimidates, that communicates that you are someone you know. Have you ever noticed how some leaders walk into a room and the atmosphere changes? They haven't even opened their mouths yet, but they are already imposing silence. This is the energy you begin to cultivate when you choose respect over exposure. It's not about hiding. It's about becoming unreadable. Once you understand that respect is born from uncertainty and not from explanation, the game begins to change levels. People who manage to maintain control over their words and gestures create a magnetic field of curiosity and fear around them. Doubt becomes your most faithful ally. The question is no longer who is this person, but rather, what is he capable of? And this question, alone, already works as shielding. In today's world where everyone shouts on social media, where everyone wants to prove their importance, those who choose silence become enigmas, and enigmas are not attacked, they are studied. It is at this point that the idea of unpredictability as a defense and attack tool arises. You need to be the kind of person that no one can predict. And this does not require great acts, but small, calculated deviations. The employee who never reacts the same way to criticism. The friend who doesn't comment on everything he sees. The woman who, when faced with a provocation, smiles calmly instead of retaliating. These people are confusing, and confusion is the first step to respect. Remember the historical figure of Mitsuhide Akechi, the samurai who betrayed Oda Nobunaga in feudal Japan. Nobody suspected him until the last second. He cultivated an image of absolute loyalty, but quietly analyzed opportunities. His unpredictability gave him the element of surprise, and for a few days control of an empire. This is not about betrayal, but about understanding that predictability is a death sentence in the game of influence. If everyone knows how you react, how you think, where it hurts, where you defend yourself, then you've already lost. To be untouchable is to be illegible. It's making your opponents spend energy trying to figure out whether you're about to act or just watching. Because what weakens others is not the blow itself, but the fear of the blow. And this fear is often enough to defeat them before the fight even begins. This posture, however, requires emotional control. And here's a game changer. Emotional people are easy to manipulate. Exploding, crying, begging, justifying. All of these reactions are predictable and therefore easily overcome. Now the strategist takes a deep breath. Observe. Wait. Act when the advantage is absolute. It's not about coldness out of cruelty. This is emotional intelligence, and it is built little by little as steel is forged, in the heat of experience and in the cold of waiting. A modern example. See how some great entrepreneurs don't react publicly to scandals. They prefer silence, strategic construction behind the scenes, and when they return to the scene, they return bigger. While the critics were busy screaming, they were growing up. This logic applies to everything. Business, relationships, friendships, family conflicts. You don't need to win by shouting louder. Need to win when no one else is paying attention. Because while everyone is looking for applause, you are looking for position. While everyone wants to prove themselves right, you want to be in the right place. This is strategy. That's why great chess players don't celebrate checkmate by shouting. They just watch, silent, while the opponent realizes that all the moves were already planned 10 moves ago. Now stop and think. How many times do you sabotage yourself by acting in the heat of emotion? How many hasty decisions have you made because you felt rejected, frustrated, offended? How many doors have you closed because you wanted to prove something at the wrong time? The true untouchable knows that emotion is a knife that should only be used when you know the blade and the cut. And most of all, he understands that feeling is not the problem. Reacting without thinking is. So start training. The next time something upsets you, take a breath. Write, wait, calculate. Great strategists are not apathetic. They are disciplined. But for this to work, you need to let go of the desire to be liked by everyone. This is one of the great traps of vulnerability, the desire to please. You adapt, you apologize, you give in. And all this not out of nobility, but out of fear of being rejected. This makes you predictable, manipulable, and, above all, fragile. And make no mistake, there are people who smell this weakness like a dog smells fear. If you always seek approval, you will never have power. Alternatively, seek respect, because those who respect you think twice before testing your limits. And here comes a phrase that can change the way you see relationships. Don't love me, understand me. Love blinds. Understanding disciplines. Love, when not balanced, leads to permissiveness. Understanding imposes limits. You don't need to be seen as the kindest person. You need to be seen as the person no one dares to disrespect. And this image arises in part from the way you regulate access to your life. Because those who have too much access observe too much. And those who observe too much learn to manipulate. Start controlling who enters when they enter and what they can see. In real life, access control is power control. You don't need to respond to every message. You don't need to accept all invitations. You don't need to show everything on social media. You are a fortress, and fortresses that leave their gates open too much fall faster. Be like old medieval castles. High walls, few entrances, and each one carefully guarded. What is rare is worth more. That which is inaccessible is feared. And here's a modern micro-example. Look at public figures who maintain an air of mystery. They appear little, speak even less. But when they speak, everyone stops to listen. This doesn't happen by chance. It is deliberate image construction. While others beg for attention, they attract it with silence. And in the silence, they dominate. Invisibility is one of the greatest shields of power. Be the kind of person that no one can completely map out, which is not always available. That cannot be predicted. Because in this game, the unpredictable always wins over the insistent. By now, you may have already realized that the true game of power is not won with brute force, nor with inflammatory speeches, but with control. And control requires something few have, the ability to separate affection from strategy. This is where many fall, and fall badly, because they confuse emotional ties with functional alliances. They want security and promises, when the real world only responds to needs and interests. The truth is brutal. No one is loyal to you. People are loyal to the advantages they get from being by your side. And if those advantages disappear, loyalty evaporates like smoke. Does it seem harsh? But it's liberating. When you understand this, you stop building relationships based on pure emotion. It starts to build on strategic interdependence. Take the historical case of Marcus Licinius Crassus, the richest man in ancient Rome. He was not admired by everyone, but he was indispensable. His influence came from the fact that many depended on him, financially, politically, even to escape conviction. This made even Julius Caesar seek his alliance. Crassus was not charismatic. It was necessary. And need in this game is worth more than love. If you want to be untouchable, you need to stop measuring relationships by affection and start measuring them by balance of power. This doesn't mean you will become cold or insensitive. It means you will stop giving yourself completely to those who don't offer you structure in return. It's a silent contract. You offer value and, in return, demand respect. This is how you stop being manipulated by praise or promises and start commanding the terms of the exchange. In today's world, where everyone wants something, a contact, an opportunity, a piece of your attention, access to you needs to be earned, and most importantly, sustained. See what happens to people who grow up quickly, but continue to act as if they are too accessible. They get sucked in, used, then discarded. It's like that entrepreneur who started the company with friends, shared everything with everyone, but when she was successful, she became the target of the same people who said they supported her. Because by giving too much without a filter, she fed milk to snakes. Result? She was bitten by who she called her brother. You cannot allow this. You need to establish a new logic. Whoever wants closeness with you must bring something to the table. It could be practical loyalty, strategic vision, silent support. But there needs to be balance. Otherwise, you become fertile ground for emotional exploiters. And remember, the explorer does not attack with a sword, but with affection. He says he admires you, that he wants to see you grow. But little by little, he starts to demand, compare, blame. And when you realize it, you are trapped in an emotional cycle that saps your energy and weakens your image. To avoid this, be selective. Not out of arrogance, but out of necessity. People with real power cannot be too accessible. It destroys mystery, breaks authority, and worse, allows others to read your moves. Whoever sees you too much understands you too much. and whoever understands you too much will one day control you. Take the example of global leaders. Even the most popular ones have areas of their lives that no one touches, because they understood that too much exposure is the first crack in the fortress. The untouchable, therefore, does not isolate himself. He protects himself. He sets up invisible fences. He smiles, but doesn't give away the plan. He listens, but filters what he absorbs. He builds relationships, but knows that every relationship needs balance and strategic distance. You don't need 1,000,000 friends. You need 4 or 5 true allies. And even with them, you need to maintain the throne of autonomy. Because if you depend too much on anyone, you are putting your life in the hands of something you don't control. This even goes for the person you love. Do not confuse emotional intensity with effective shielding. The deepest love can turn into the most heartbreaking disappointment. Have you ever seen stories of 20-year marriages that ended in betrayal? Of brothers who sued each other for money? Of partners who destroyed themselves due to ego? What do all these stories have in common? A blind trust, a complete abandonment of emotional vigilance. And the untouchable does not abandon his vigilance, ever. This does not mean living in distrust of everything and everyone. It means living awake, aware that human nature is unstable, aware that interests change, aware that today's loyalty could be tomorrow's blow. But if you're already prepared, the blow won't knock you down. It just reveals. And that's what separates the strong from the untouchable. The strong react. The untouchables anticipate. So, start reorganizing your relationships today. Don't break up with everyone, but review. Observe patterns. Analyze behaviors. See who really brings value to your life and who just consumes your energy. See who disappears when you say no. See who is offended by your silence. See who charges you more than they offer. These people are cracks in your structure. These are invisible risks, and they need to be placed where they belong, outside your wall of control. Because in the end, being untouchable is not being unreachable. It's being inaccessible to those who don't understand the value of what you've built. And whoever doesn't understand, doesn't deserve it. Your energy is too precious to be spent explaining, defending, or proving your worth. Let the actions speak. Let your absence become presence. Let your silence teach more than your speeches. This is the beginning of personal supremacy. Not with shouting, but with firm choices. Not with fear, but with clear limits. And above all, with the awareness that every poorly constructed link is a door to ruin. Close those doors with respect. Calmly, but close. Because the world will not forgive you for being too good to those who don't respect you. The world punishes those who are available, and it rewards the selective. Silence is not absence. It is a strategic presence. When used well, it speaks louder than any argument, any answer, any justification. Silence scares, disarms, disturbs, because human beings are terrified of what they don't understand and panic about what they don't control. And that is exactly why the untouchable learns to cultivate silence as an invisible weapon. Not a passive silence, but a silence that acts, that observes, calculates, waits, and when necessary, achieves with precision. Have you ever witnessed a room in which a single person remains silent when faced with a provocation, while everyone waits for a response that doesn't come? And then, does the weight of this silence become unbearable? This is the strength of calculated absence. It was with this power that figures like Deng Xiaoping shaped modern China. He rarely spoke in public, almost never gave interviews, and yet, it moved gigantic pieces on the geopolitical board. While the spotlight was on louder leaders, he was quietly reforming a country. Why? Because he knew that the most solid influence is one that does not depend on constant presence. She is the one who acts in the shadow. In your daily life, silence is the shield against emotional tests. Does someone provoke you? Silence. Is anyone trying to get a reaction? Silence. Does someone spread something about you expecting you to explain yourself? Silence. Because what enemies want isn't just to hit you, it's to force you to reveal yourself. Emotion forces you to speak. Strategy forces you to think. And it is by thinking, not reacting, that you dominate the game. Silence also erodes the influence of those who try to attack you. You see, when someone talks bad about you and you respond, you make a statement. When you silence, the narrative floats. People start to doubt the accusation simply because you didn't react as expected. This breaks mental patterns. This creates insecurity on the other side. The person who attacked you begins to question, doesn't he care? Is he planning something? And this doubt is the beginning of despair. Use silence, too, as a way to control time. Don't answer everything right away. The immediate response is emotion. The calculated answer is power. Remember when great generals waited for the right moment to attack? Napoleon, for example, didn't win because he had more troops. He won because he waited. He observed the enemy's movements, wore down their morale, and only then acted. Many battles were won not by strength but by strategic patience. And in life, it's the same. He who responds immediately responds predictably, but whoever waits lets others reveal themselves completely, and there is more. Silence allows you to see more clearly who the players around you are. When you stop talking, people reveal themselves. They talk too much. They try to fill the void. And when they talk too much, they say more than they should. You collect information, perceive intentions, analyze patterns. What was previously invisible becomes transparent. And without moving a muscle, you become the most informed player in the room. Of course, there are times when action will be necessary, but even these movements must come from silence. You act when no one expects you. You respond when the opportunity is definitive. No threats, no hints, no theatrics. The untouchable does not announce his steps. He executes them. And the surprise is part of the impact. Think about the contemporary example of CEOs of large companies who, in the face of public crises, disappear. Absolute silence for days. Meanwhile, prepare the perfect answer. And when they return, the crisis has already been suffocated, the opponents have lost steam, and the market has reacted with respect. That's what we're talking about. The strength of moving out of sight. On a personal level, this also applies. You do not need to explain the reason for a leave. No need to justify cutting ties. If someone disrespects you, disappear. Absence is the answer. Distance is a message. Coldness, if well applied, transforms dependence into regret, and repentance need not be required. It arises naturally when absence weighs more than any confrontation. How many people have you seen begging for explanations from someone who simply disappeared? This disappearance is more effective than 1,000 arguments. And don't think that this is soulless coldness. Think this is protection with intelligence. The truth is that you don't owe anything to anyone who doesn't respect you. There should be no explanations, no reactions, no space. You owe yourself the right to protect yourself with grace. And that is rare, because the majority prefers to shout on Twitter, post indirect messages on Instagram, send emotional audios on WhatsApp. But the untouchables choose another path, the path of active silence. Who observes? What plans? That hits at the right time, without warning, without a trace, without hesitation. Now if you ask yourself, but what if I'm wrong to keep quiet? What if I miss an opportunity by not responding? The answer is simple. If something or someone is really worth it, they will recognize its value even in silence. What falls apart because of your absence was already fragile, and what resists is what deserves space in your life. Because power is not in being heard. It is being felt, even without speaking. And this is a level that few reach. Train this. Start slowly. Resist the urge to answer everything. Resist the urge to justify yourself. Let the other side fill the void. Watch. Over time, you will realize that silence is the most efficient form of communication. No, because it doesn't say anything, but because it says what it needs to say, without fuss, without drama, without waste. And in the end, when you act, everyone realizes that the silence was just a warning that something much bigger was on the way. There comes a time when it's not enough to just look strong. You need to act like it. And acting in this case does not mean attacking on impulse, but precisely removing what threatens your balance. Because the truth is simple. Not every problem can be solved with dialogue. Not every threat retreats in the face of arguments. There are situations in which cutting is nobler than understanding, and silence is more effective than forgiveness. It's tough, but it's real, and the untouchable knows this. The modern world insists on romanticizing the idea of giving new chances, to understand the other, to wait for change. But anyone who knows human nature in depth knows that not every mistake is an accident. Many are trials to see how far they can go with you. The first time someone betrays you is a test. The second is choice. The third is dominance. If you continue there, you are no longer a victim. It's voluntary. The untouchable does not allow himself to be voluntary in his own destruction. It observes, detects, and when necessary, remove, without hesitation. History is full of examples of leaders who lost everything because they hesitated to cut when it was time to cut. Louis XVI in France had numerous chances to anticipate the events of the French Revolution. There was time, there were warnings, there was advice, but he hesitated. He tried to please everyone, he tried to maintain political ties that were already rotten. Result? The guillotine. Literally. And this is a lesson for anyone who insists on keeping alliances dead for fear of appearing cruel. You need to understand. Preserving what has already betrayed you is guaranteeing the repetition of pain. Forgiving an enemy without him fearing the consequence is not nobility. It is an invitation to new blows. This does not mean living in anger or acting out of revenge. It means acting for purpose. What does this solve? What does this cut guarantee? What does this separation prevent? The answer to these questions should guide your actions. Because the untouchable does not act to take revenge. Act to not having to defend yourself again. And that's why when it's necessary to impose yourself, do it definitively. No messages, no games. The person who tries to sabotage you at work, cut off access, eliminate her influence over your decisions, neutralize her movements. The friend who disrespects you in public with jokes disguised as affection. A silent separation is worth more than any confrontation. The ex-partner who keeps pulling you back into cycles of guilt. Disappear, not with hate, but with strategy. Because, as an old proverb said, whoever closes a door firmly prevents it from becoming a passage again. And understand, this is not about isolation, it's about control. You continue to open doors, but with criteria. You continue interacting, but with reading. The untouchable is always 10 steps ahead. He sees patterns. He understands that the pattern is more revealing than the speech. Someone may say they love you, but if they expose you, if they put you down, if they compete with you between the lines, that's the standard that matters. And a repeating pattern is a sign that the person will not change but will repeat with more skill next time. In a more contemporary scenario, think of the businesswoman who finds herself stuck with a partner who constantly undermines her trust in meetings. She tries to talk, tries to give in, tries to understand, but the results get worse. And only when she finally removes this partner, silently, cutting off his participation in strategic decisions, does her company prosper again. The mistake was not trusting. The mistake was to insist. And it is this type of insistence that the untouchable eliminates from his life. There is even a phrase that should accompany you. Don't give warnings. Give consequences. Warnings are ignored by those who have become accustomed to their tolerance. But silent consequences teach more than 1,000 speeches. When someone notices that you have moved away, that you no longer respond in the same way, that you no longer give in to the old game, that absence teaches you. This absence weighs heavily, because it shows that you don't need to prove anything or demand respect. You just withdraw, and what you take away, you strengthen. Another point, cuts should not be theatrical. The untouchable does not scream when cutting. He just turns off access. It doesn't block on impulse, it just becomes unattainable. He doesn't announce breakups. He disappears with class. Because your life is strategic, not emotional. And to maintain control, he knows that a clean cut is better than a dirty tie. This goes for business, friendships, relationships. In all walks of life, clinging to broken connections is what sinks powerful minds the most. But there is something even more refined. Know how to cut before the poison spreads. You don't need to wait for the blow to act. Sometimes repeated discomfort is enough. A very sarcastic comment. Too invasive a request. A selective silence at times when you needed support. These signs, no matter how small, reveal everything about the intention. And the untouchable does not ignore these signs. It acts on the first drop of poison, and not when the blood is already contaminated. And if you think this will make you lonely, understand, the untouchable is not lonely. He is surrounded only by the essentials. He has few around, but everyone knows that his presence is a privilege, not an obligation. And when you live like this, you begin to attract relationships that truly respect your greatness. Because those who cannot stand their limits are the ones who wanted to violate them. And those who remain despite them are the ones who elevate you. This is the real filter, the ultimate shield, the cut that protects more than any armor. When you choose your company rigorously, when you cut out the excess and embrace the essential, you don't just protect yourself, you elevate yourself. Those who scream for recognition are usually far from true power. The need to be noticed is the anchor that holds many to the ground. The untouchables, on the other hand, do not want applause. They want dominance. And the most absolute dominion is the one that happens without being noticed. Anyone who is seen all the time becomes a target. Those who act without being noticed build kingdoms while others fight for audiences. Here's the final secret. The safest power is the one that doesn't require visibility. In the modern world where everyone is addicted to validation, knowing how to disappear is revolution. People exhaust themselves trying to be remembered. They post every day. They comment on everything. They're everywhere. But the true strategist acts like underground water, influences everything without ever being seen. He doesn't need the crown because he controls who wears it. It doesn't need to be in the center because it draws the lines that lead to the center. This is not cowardice. It's operational intelligence. Remember the figure of Richelieu, the cardinal who governed France from the shadows while the king signed the decrees? He understood early on that the title of king attracts daggers, but the invisible power rules without opposition. Whoever is not seen is not attacked. Those who are not detected are not blocked. The untouchable learned from the greats. You don't need to be on stage to control the play. And the fewer people who know about your plans, the harder it will be to overturn them. In practice, this translates into silent and consistent movements. You don't announce that you're going to change your strategy. You change it. You don't say you're growing. You grow. And when others notice, it will be too late. While they watched you in yesterday, you are already operating in tomorrow. This requires restraint, vision, and above all detachment from the ego. Because the ego wants credit, but the strategist wants control. And control often requires the sacrifice of recognition. Take the example of the mentor who trains leaders, but never presents himself as the genius behind success. He elevates them, grooms them, shapes them, and lets the world celebrate them. In the meantime, your interests remain protected. This is dominion without vanity, power without spotlight. And this is where true invulnerability lies, because what cannot be named cannot be fought. Invisibility also protects you from comparisons. When you are constantly exposing yourself, it becomes a standard of measurement. People start to follow your pace, copy your methods, study your flaws. You become predictable. But when you withdraw a little, when you leave gaps, others project doubts, not certainties. And doubts are more powerful than data. They generate caution, hesitation, fear. And fear paralyzes more than any blow. In everyday life, this means learning to keep your next steps to yourself. Are you investing in a new project? Don't tell. Are you changing cities? Talk only after it is installed. Are you moving away from someone? Let them understand by space, not by explanation. Each time you act without narrating, you increase your advantage. Because the world is always ready to attack what it understands. But when there is no reading, there is no sabotage. What's more, strategic invisibility isn't just about hiding. It's about knowing how and when to appear. The untouchable chooses the moment to be seen. It appears when its presence changes the environment, not when it wants to be noticed. It's like that expert who only speaks at the meeting when the final decision is at stake. His speech has weight because it is rare. Your presence is remembered because it is not constant. And when he speaks, everyone listens, not because of volume, but because of timing. You want to be that presence, the one that comes in and changes the course, the one everyone waits for, even without announcing its arrival. This is not a gift. It's choice. A choice that begins with controlling your own ego. The ego will scream, be recognized, prove your worth, show that you are better. Ignore, prove with results, not words. Show it with victories, not with speeches. Because the quieter you are, the louder your presence echoes. And finally, understand one crucial thing. The less you show yourself, the more you multiply. People don't know where you are, so they assume you're everywhere. This generates the myth. This generates the aura. The discreet teacher who everyone says is brilliant but reserved. The consultant that no one sees but every big name mentions. The investor that almost no one knows, but is behind the biggest projects. These are the untouchables, because you can't destroy what no one can hold. If you want to be remembered forever, learn to disappear in the now. The impact comes from what you build without needing to be seen. Like a concrete foundation beneath the surface, its structure grows without display. And when the world notices, you will be unshakable. Because visibility gives fame, but invisibility gives power. And power is what keeps the real ones on top. You don't need everyone to know who you are. You need those who really matter to never forget the impact you've made. This is the last lesson and perhaps the most valuable. Untouchables do not live for recognition, but for influence. They build legacies while others chase likes. They plant roots in silence while the others reap applause that evaporates in minutes. And when the game ends, what remains? The one you built to last, not to show off. This is the ultimate power. Be an invisible architect of your own empire. You can be the name behind the decisions that transform companies, families, stories. It can be the mind that guides, the look that prevents, the step that changes the rhythm of the environment. No need to scream. No need to beg for attention. You are what changes the game even when you are not on the board. And that kind of presence can't be bought. It is built day after day, with conscious choices. Look around. How many of those who screamed for validation in recent years still have relevance? How many of those who were behind, in silence, today, control the direction of everything? The answer is clear. The real world rewards consistency, vision, and emotional intelligence. The stage rewards for moments, but the backstage builds eternities. So choose where you want to be, and know that real kings don't wear crowns. They sign contracts. They make decisions. They shape futures. And they do this often, while the world is still trying to understand who is really in charge. If you have absorbed this far, understand. The untouchable is not a being that is unreachable by nature. It is built, honed in pain, tested in silence, tempered by the coldness of calculation. He learned not to seek justice, but results, not to trust words, but standards, not reacting with emotion, but with purpose. He doesn't run away from battle. He just doesn't tell you when he's going to win. And winning for the untouchable is not dominating others. It's mastering yourself. Winning is resisting the temptation to explain yourself. It's refusing the trap of pleasing. It is understanding that true peace is not the absence of enemies, but the presence of control. Control over your image, your access, your links, and above all, your limits. But that doesn't mean you're alone. On the contrary, there is a silent legion of people awakening to this new way of living. People who no longer want to beg for affection but rather build respect. People like you who decided to stop being targets and started becoming strategists. That you are learning to act with intention, to cut with dignity, to disappear with wisdom, and to return only when it is impossible to ignore your presence. And this is where an invitation comes in. Don't walk alone. If this video spoke to you, if at any point in this journey you felt like something inside changed, then this community is the place for you. Here you don't need to explain yourself. It just needs to keep growing. Share your story in the comments, not to vent, but to inspire others like you. Say what you learned, say what you already applied, say where it hurt, and where you shielded yourself. We want to know who you became after that. We want to see you transform your pain into a strategy, your disappointment into a wall, your absence into an immortal presence. Here, it's not about fame. It's about strength. It's not about like. It's about legacy. And if you are committed to this, then subscribe to the channel now. Because here, every week you receive tools. Not stock phrases, not shallow self-help, but real mental weapons for a world that does not forgive innocence. If you made it to the end, you are already different. He's already thinking in silence. You are already choosing who deserves to know your next steps. They are already rethinking who comes in, who stays, and who goes. And that, in itself, is a breakthrough that many will never experience. Not out of inability, but out of fear. Fear of appearing cold, of appearing distant, of appearing calculating. But here's a final secret. It's better to appear calculating than to be destroyed for being genuine with someone who just wanted an advantage. Then follow. Follow like a shadow that anticipates movement, like a breeze that announces a storm, like the presence that scares without needing to threaten. You are not just another one. You are becoming what few have the courage to be. someone no one dares to underestimate. May your absence confuse. May your presence make an impact. May your word matter. And may your silence continue to be the greatest warning. Sign up, comment, share, but most of all, practice. The next move is yours. And you already know whoever plays silently never loses.